Gated communities aren't exactly a common occurrence across the world of Fallout, but gated communities that are also connected to secret research facilities, well, that's a bit more unique. I'm Mark from Digital Dissection. I make Fallout lore videos, and today we examine the Fallout 4 community of Covenant and its many unique revelations. It's a shame that so much of Fallout's world is built on tragedy. And no, we're not talking about the bombs that literally wiped out billions of innocent lives. Obviously, this is still very tragic. But the community of Covenant in the Boston Commonwealth finds itself tied to a more recent tragedy than the Great War of 2077. Before this idyllic, oddly intact mini-suburb existed, its creation was actually due to an event that struck Diamond City on an unsuspecting May evening in 2229.
Just under 60 years before the events of Fallout 4 took place, a mysterious man by the name of Carter arrived at the Central Bar in the former Major League Baseball stadium. Carter, of course, had no ties to the settlement, but began sharing stories with fellow bar patrons, detailing his origins of being from out west, as the crowd continued to enjoy drinks on what we're assuming was a mild-weathered evening. As the night's events drew on, however, eyewitnesses stated that they saw Carter's cheek begin to twitch, and completely unprompted by anyone's behavior, drew a revolver on the bar patrons. Without warning, the emotionless Carter shot the Central Bar's then bartender named Henry, with a single gunshot wound to the head. The scene became one of carnage, as the Diamond City stranger threw patrons to the ground with an unimaginable level of strength, taking multiple security guards to finally bring the man down. All told, by the end of this incredibly violent act, 10 people would lose their lives, leaving the shocked bar patrons to make sense of what they had just encountered. Investigators began to examine Carter's corpse, leading to the discovery that his remains contained an unusual amount of plastic and metal pieces. As it turned out, Carter was no man at all, but a Generation 3 synthetic humanoid created by the Institute. The event itself would become known as the Broken Mask Incident, kicking off generations of synth paranoia in Diamond City, while inspiring others to move on to find a new community.
Naturally, the Broken Mask incident, of course, sent ripples through the Boston Commonwealth, as synths were now exposed to the world outside of the Institute. This event, however, created an orphan by the name of Rosalind Chambers. Rosalind lost both of her parents in the massacre, inspiring her to find a new community, one that believed in the vision of a refuge for those impacted by the Institute's synth experiments. The small location of Covenant seemed to be a place that at least had a decent reputation, an ideal settlement that existed before Chambers even arrived. Its initial settlers created a small village in its pre-war architecture, a series of homes bunched together that still retain a level of quaintness even after the old world died. Even amongst the many settlements found in Fallout 4, Covenant's appearance provides a stark contrast to the others, especially as its buildings are in remarkably good shape. Regardless, after Rosalind and her team left Diamond City, Covenant's community now features heavily armed automated turrets, an armored front gate, and a completely changed reputation. In a short period of time, Chambers' own unresolved traumatic past and strong anti-synth opinions took a deep root in the community, as the settlers who did create lives there now were active participants in a knowing experiment that Covenant was now responsible for hiding. Covenant, as a small protected village, offered a level of protection not just to its inhabitants, but provided an illusion to those who might pass by it. Its community offers a cheerful demeanor and several amenities worthy of attracting outsiders, which include a general store, as well as a doctor by the name of Patricia Montgomery, making this spot an ideal hub of sorts to host traders and passing caravans consistently. This was a front, however, as a meticulously created veneer, one meant to serve out the nefarious purpose behind Rosalind Chambers' response to eradicating the synth threat. Chambers over time began to formulate an approach that could accurately identify synthetic life forms, and with the help of the Covenant community, see a steady influx of individuals to perform her experiments on. Chambers installed a formal process to assess all visitors upon their arrival at Covenant, an exam performed by its gatekeeper named Swanson. The safe test, or entrance exam, is advertised as a way to keep undesirables from entering the community. But in actuality, it's a psychology test specifically meant to test individuals against synth rationale. The test involves 9 questions, designed to target synthetic logic, which supposedly features certain answers that only synths would potentially fall for. Its 4th question, for example, is widely thought to be the most likely to catch a synth in its design. The question reads, "Congratulations, you made it onto a baseball team. Which position do you prefer? 1. Pitcher. 2. Catcher. 3. Designated hitter. 4. I don't play baseball. I play soccer." According to the exam, those who choose catcher are more likely to be a synth, as apparently this is not a position that most normal humans would apparently select. But Covenant scientists believe that baseball was key to the test's performance.
You've made your opinions quite clear on the value of question 3. Removing it could invalidate all the data we've accumulated to date. Moving on, question 4. The data on this is fascinating. Why does baseball have the highest degree of correlation? Even more than question 8.
Our methodology was exhaustive. Subject 12's answers in regards to baseball in his childhood were particularly fascinating. See here and here.
I wonder, do they play baseball in the Institute? Or is there some sort of defect in their programming?
Regardless, the test itself upon a passing result will allow you entrance to Covenant. But should you fail, this would involve a drastically different set of circumstances. Covenant was clearly transformed by extreme rhetoric, especially one as polarizing as the humanity synths might be able to attain. But this extreme rhetoric also allowed Covenant to reach new heights. But the appearance of this beautiful community hides a dark secret. Those who failed the safe test would be kidnapped, and later be brought to a nearby hidden facility known as the Compound. Hidden within a sewer system, it was here that Rosalind and her fellow scientists began to carry out different experiments on travelers, who dared to answer the safe test incorrectly. Rosalind's logic was that modern generation synthetic life forms are nearly indistinguishable from human forms via standard medical testing, and subjecting them to a more enhanced psychological examination would be key to unearthing detectable behavior of a synth infiltration.
Please, I got a kid.
Do you want another treatment?
No.
So, again, congratulations, you made it onto a baseball team. Which position do you prefer?
I've already told you. Catcher.
Again, which position?
Catcher. I'd be the catcher.
Why?
I don't know. They got the funny helmets. I saw a picture when I was a kid.
Do synths even know the rules of baseball?
No, please. I'm not. Just let me. No!
Just answer the questions and only the questions. Congratulations, you made it onto a baseball team. Which position do you prefer?
Catcher.
The intense levels of psychological and physical torture that the Compound scientists used to identify synths is the stuff of nightmares, as it seems that either electrical shocks, isolation, and physical violence are on the table to ensure a successful safe test. Ironic in practice. The Compound's efforts under Rosalind's leadership in using the test have been proceeding forward regardless of these atrocities, and they require a steady amount of test subjects to perform these experiments on. In time, however, Covenant's reputation begins to spread further amongst weary traders and travelers across the Commonwealth, making finding additional test subjects increasingly difficult. As a result, this leads the Covenant community to attack and apprehend a caravan owned by Old Man Stockton, which is at the center of the quest Human Error, which allows players to address the future fate of this research operation and Covenant itself. Regardless of how players might address this scenario, the site's success, according to Chambers, now boasts a 70% accuracy rate in identifying suspected synthetics. But in all cases, even the test's effectiveness relies on an autopsy, as the subjects do not leave the Compound alive. This fact represents a stunning reality, that the Compound could be responsible for dozens, possibly hundreds of disappearances, all in the name of science. But the obvious notion about the compound's experiments is that it was clearly influenced and taken entirely from the GOAT series of tests, a series of questions administered to vault dwellers found in Fallout 3's Vault 101. The SAFE test in comparison is near identical to the Generalized Occupational Aptitude Test, which was used to determine job placement and future prospects for Vault 101 inhabitants. The only omissions made for the SAFE test include references to Vault 101 itself, and questions regarding the celebration of its overseer. Overall, though, the compound scientific community clearly adopted the test for a reason, as it was highly unlikely they discovered it by accident. The compound security team also wears Vault-Tec security armor, dyed to a more tan or brownish color, and Rosalind Chambers herself even wears a Vault-Tec scientist jacket. Where they happen to find these resources, however, is up for debate. But with the Vault-Tec Regional HQ in the Beacon Hill District, it's possible the compound scientific team might have visited here and acquired the GOAT's documentation. In addition, Covenant's holding chambers also feature posters that match known art for the GOAT test featured in Vault 101, lending further evidence that the test wasn't simply a Fallout 3 outlier, and that it might have been present even in additional vaults, which means that any in the Boston Commonwealth either had the posters themselves or their own documentation for how to administer the test. Regardless of where Rosalind and her scientists located Vault-Tec's former aptitude test, the entirety of Covenant's scientific community is powered and protected by pre-war assets. In this series, we've talked about numerous iterations of unknowing tests administered across both the private and public sectors of Fallout's past and future. What makes Covenant so oddly familiar is that it represents a similar approach taken by the cannibals of Fallout 3's Andale, who showcase a somewhat normal community that uses a sense of safety to conceal a tremendous level of darkness. In the same vein, Covenant scientists justify their research in much the same way as Andale's cannibals, that their survival is dependent upon horrific acts of violence to achieve a central goal. In this case, humanity may not be eaten to advance the interests of Covenant, but their ability to exist is only made possible by stealing the possessions of those they capture, and they use this to attract others to the trading post with prices that frankly don't make sense anywhere else. The public-facing side of Covenant may not be the most violent necessarily, but this level of deception and brainwashing to its settlers is worth analyzing separately, as the intense levels of hatred Covenant has for synthetic forms was enough to justify kidnapping, torture, and murder. Sometimes it's the human condition that we truly need to think more about, and what we're willing to do to advance our own ideals. And with that, I thank you for joining me as I explored the history of Fallout 4's Covenant. Did you end up discovering this settlement? How did you end up handling the quest Human Error? Let me know in the comments. For more content just like this video, you can find our entire Fallout Exploring the Wasteland playlist linked here, as well as a suggested video from this series if you like this one. I can't thank you enough for our growing community and for those that continue to support these videos. It does mean a lot to me, and I look forward to sharing more of these stories with you. As always, Wastelanders, keep on dissecting. This is Mark signing off.